I'm very much looking forward to today's conversation because I've got two amazing marketers on this call with me, and we're going to walk through, I think, a really kind of genius use case of true intent data and drift. And here to help me do that, here actually to take center stage, is Jessica Brook. Jessica is Senior Manager of Demand Gen at Operationalizing and a very innovative, data-driven and testing-driven demand gen manager. She uses, as we'll talk about, true intent data from TrustRadius in drift in a use case that I haven't seen anybody else do yet, and I think is phenomenally insightful and has driven some success. But really what's most interesting is she is a Bay Area native with a Disney obsession. So I've got to ask Jessica, because I'm a Disney fan too, what's your favorite Disney experience you've ever had?
Yeah, thanks for having me today. This is actually my first webinar in front of the camera. Normally I am behind the scenes, making sure everything's working on the back end. So excited to be here today. And if there's any marketers listening and you have a cool story to share, but you're shy or nervous, don't be, because if I can do it, you can do it. My favorite Disney experience would have to be last summer. I actually got engaged at Disneyland. My fiance flew in my family, his family, my friends. There was about 15 people there in front of the castle, and he proposed, which has to be my favorite experience.
That is amazing. And so we also know who your favorite Disney prince is, clearly.
Yes.
Also with us, we have Mark Kylans from Drift. Mark has a long track record in creating content and using it to influence and convert. He led blogging, editorial, social, and events team. Well, he leads blogging, editorial, social, and events teams at Drift. And he was also founder, VP at HubSpot, and founder of HubSpot Academy. So I've really enjoyed our conversations and getting ready because he really has a sharp eye on what content can do. So I've got to ask Mark, what is your favorite piece of content that you've ever created and why?
It's a good question. Hello, Jessica. Hello, Russ. Thanks for having me. Looking forward to the conversation today. I'm going to cheat, kind of. It's not just one piece of content. It's a content experience. And right now, it has to be what we're doing at Drift with Drift Insider. You can find hundreds and hundreds of classes, lots and lots of courses, free certification programs, and it's basically guided. It's a guided content experience, a guided learning experience, which I think is becoming much more prolific in the B2B space as a way to generate demand. So yeah, I'm really excited to be talking about this. That we have some amazing use cases around how you can use intent data to guide the buying journey and convert and start more conversations with people faster.
Outstanding. Thanks, Mark. And I love that you're thinking about content as an ecosystem. And for me, I lead marketing for TrustRadius. Doing high growth startups is kind of what I do. I've done several, have a couple good exits behind me. I do spend my spare time, and those that can see the camera would know this, collecting and restoring vintage guitars. So that's me and what I do. And I want to sort of jump right into this because there's some great stuff. To level set, the buyer's journey at this point is 100% digital. I don't know if anybody remembers before March, but at that point, the buyer's journey was perhaps 67% digital because we went to events and met each other and did stuff like that, right? And we no longer do. With COVID, we are 100% online. Many of us are working from home. And as companies have navigated that uncertainty, as you can see in the chart, the budgets are starting to stabilize. People are starting to understand whether they will change their software spend, whether they'll spend yes or spend more. There's still 25% even now that are uncertain, but we're starting to see some stabilization and a lot of coalescing around we're going to spend roughly the same. So that's from our data collected on the site. And it helps us understand that the appetite to spend for software is still there, but the way we position in this new digital-only world, digital-first world, has to be very different. And in that world, your online reputation matters a lot because buying happens by committee, and half of that buying committee will never talk to a vendor. Reviews are heavily influential. 52% of B2B buyers prior to COVID used reviews to make purchase decisions. It's probably more now. That is twice as influential as analysts, actually, because only 25% use analysts to help make decisions. An interesting thing that I've learned from getting into this world is that I thought prior to working here and working with our customers that it was all about your score and your position on the grid. It's not. 90% of the time is reading the content, the stories in the reviews. And buyers get very, very deep. I was looking at Operationalizes stats, and it was super interesting that buyers spent over 10 minutes reading Operationalizes comparisons, Operationalizes versus competitor one, Operationalizes versus competitor two. Jessica, does that, as somebody that obviously really is tapped into Operationalizes customer base, does that level of attention surprise you?
It's definitely interesting to hear. As a marketer, it makes me excited to know that people are comparing us versus some of our competitors. And I completely agree with everything that was said. I think that this is even more true when you have a very technical buyer who does a lot of their research anyways. By the time this technical buyer reaches your website, they may have made up their mind already with what vendor they're going to go with. So it's really just so important to reach buyers where they're at.
I love that. Meeting them where they're at is, I think, a theme that the three of us very much have in common in how we approach things. And Jessica, you've scaled a really strong review program, almost 400 customers on the record, many of those quotes tagged and ready for sales and marketing to use, almost 12,000 page views. What sort of interests me is I look a lot at category statistics because I'm sort of a nerd that way, and 19% share of audience in the A/B testing category. You should know that's a really high share of audience. And that speaks to Operationalizes' position, arguably as a category king. They tend to be one of the first companies that come to mind when you think of testing. But then I also, Jessica, I want to know how much you look at this as the glass half full, the glass half empty, because the glass half full is 1 in 5 visitors shopping the category are looking at Operationalizes, but the glass half empty is then 4 out of 5 aren't. How do you interpret that set? Do you think about reaching those additional 81%?
Yeah, the 19% share of voice gets me really excited. I think, like you said, it really speaks to our position as a market leader in A/B testing and experimentation. I definitely think that while we've done really great progress with our program, there's more work to be done, thinking of how we can reach those other buyers and how we can use things like trust quotes in our landing pages to drive more conversions is things that we're thinking about for our review program. So I'm excited, but definitely acknowledge that there's still work to be done in trying to reach these other buyers.
Awesome. And the other thing I'd think about thinking about those other buyers is if I'm Mark, I would look at each of those as an opportunity to start a conversation. Is that how you'd see it, Mark?
Yeah, I mean, we talk a lot about how to use customer evidence, customer proof, and customer stories across the entire buying journey, right? And so what Jessica's doing here is awesome. I'm going to go much deeper into this, but understanding, or not understanding, but first collecting the customer evidence and proof and data points, then being able to use them in your content to start conversations and to enable your sales team. So critical today. My past company, word of mouth was the second biggest referral for new business. Like we studied this carefully. So word of mouth, second biggest. And I don't think that's going away.
It's arguably only getting bigger. I think you're absolutely right, Mark. Thank you. So we're going to, at this point, run a quick poll. And what I want to get a pulse on with this poll is how the audience is using intent data, because this is going to help us understand how, fundamentally, how you can or should, how you are using intent data so that we can understand what audience we're speaking to. So we're going to take just a minute for people to fill out the poll. Curious to know, I mean, you are both, Jessica and Mark, fairly advanced marketers. We're definitely grad school here. We're not 101. So you two, I would think, are fairly sophisticated. But when you think about the audience on the webinar, how many of them do you think are going to be using it comprehensively versus starting to use it versus perhaps not at all?
I think there's probably going to be a good portion of people who want to use it, but maybe don't have the resources to have an EBM program or a technology right now. So I'm imagining that's going to be a big percentage, and I think people are going to be using it in marketing.
That's a reasonable supposition. Mark, what would you think on that?
No, I agree. It's actually the strategy, which is what we're going to talk about today, that's most important. And I think there's a lot that people can do with their intent data that they're probably not doing. So it's basically just how can you get more value from your intent data, just like how you could get more value from a marketing channel. But it's interesting. I mean, look at this. This is interesting actually right now.
See that on the screen? 67% use it in sales and marketing.
Wow. Not what I was expecting.
This is awesome, because this means, this is the use case that we're going to talk about today is a sophisticated one. It's a super strategic one. Jessica, you made the point about resources. If people aren't using it, it may be a resource constraint. Mark, you made the point about strategy. Do they know what to do with it? So plainly, we've got the right audience on this today with, 67% using it in sales and marketing. That is phenomenal. So with that, we will move along, because now we know who we're talking to. Jessica, you obviously have, found some value in this data. Tell us a little bit about the data, what value you found, and, basically take it away. Tell us what you're doing.
Yeah, I guess I'll start at the beginning for this campaign that I ran with True Intent Data and Drift. So this campaign, this idea started at the end of our fiscal year in January 2020. And I wanted to help get some end of the year pipeline for our SDR team. And I was thinking of like, well, what could I do to generate pipeline quickly? I was thinking of like tactics, like I could send content via email or send out a webinar recording to try and get some MQLs. But because we were on such a short time frame, we needed to get pipeline before the end of the year. I couldn't really send out content and then wait for someone to download it and MQL and follow our typical MQL process, because we needed meetings, we needed a pipeline. So I wanted to focus on accounts that were farther along in their buyer's journey. And this is where TrustRadius comes into play. And I think on the next slide, there is an example of the bot that we had. Perfect. So this is where TrustRadius comes into play. I have a background in account-based marketing. I ran an ABM program at my previous company, Social Chorus. So I really know the value of intent data. And through TrustRadius intent data, I was able to see which accounts were researching Optimizely, which accounts were looking at our product category, and even able to see which accounts were researching competitors and comparing Optimizely to competitors. This data is gold. This is amazing. This is exactly what I was looking for. Now I know which accounts I should focus this end of the year campaign towards. And this is where I brought in Drift. So what I did is I looked at the last 180 days of true intent data. I exported it to a Google Doc. I filtered out any unwanted accounts like customers, or this campaign was North America, so I filtered by North America accounts only, and I was left with 176 in-market accounts. So I created a Drift bot. You can see the picture here. It was personalized by SDR owner with their name and photo. And I designed it to pop up whenever these 176 accounts were on our website, and immediately ask if they were interested in learning about Optimizely and ask if they wanted to book a meeting. The reason why I ask these accounts to immediately book a meeting is because I know they are familiar with Optimizely. They're at least familiar enough with experimentation tools, because thanks to TrustRadius, I know that they've been doing research. They're to some extent already bought into experimentation. And so my hypothesis was these accounts are more likely to take a meeting with us because they're already doing their own research. So I launched the playbook, didn't know how it was going to go, didn't know if we were going to get any engagement from this. We're all about test and learn at Optimizely, so this was an experiment and we were going to see how it went. And I'm super pleased with the results so far. We've had 11 meetings booked using this playbook and the intent data. And 4 of those meetings were sales accepted opportunities, which is pipeline. This is what our SDRs are gold on. And we even had one source close one deal from this playbook that was one of the fastest deal cycles ever. It closed in 1 day, which completely validated my hypothesis that these accounts were ready to talk to sales.
That's amazing. So this really is right message, right account, right time, and right channel. Let's have a conversation, not here's a form and let's try to qualify you, right?
Exactly. It was like the perfect storm of like all the right data points.
Perfect. And then I love that you've actually gotten a fair amount of detail here in terms of how you're setting up the instant meeting bot. Would you walk us through that for folks that may not have, tried setting up something like this before?
Sure, it's really easy to set up a bot using intent data. After I exported the data and filtered out to get those 176 accounts, I created an account segment inside Drift, and I just used 2 filters. I filtered by account domain, which was from the spreadsheet with all those in-market accounts, and then I filtered by account owner because the bot was personalized. I didn't want a bad experience if someone came to the site and for some reason they didn't have an SDR owner and then it wouldn't show a picture. We wanted this to be really, really personal. So just those 2 filters, it was very simple to set up.
Amazing.
Yeah, I love this, Jessica. I'm just gonna add one thing, if that's okay, Russ, just because I think it's important. Like what you did, Jessica, is what every really smart marketer does. You start with the who, like the audience, and you're using intent data to really narrow that down so you can accelerate the purchase decision. You could accelerate, the time to booking a meeting, to creating an opportunity, and then ultimately to revenue. Then what you did is you took the who, you combined that with like where are they maybe coming from. In this case, it really doesn't matter. Like as long as they're coming to the website, that's all that matters. And
right.
What page are they coming to? It doesn't matter either, because it sounds like you added Drift to all the pages. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right.
Love that. And then it's like the thing that I think marketers then also forget, which you obviously didn't, is like why. What is the buyer's outcome at that particular point in their journey? And you can really kind of understand that better with intent data. And then why does the business want to engage with them at that point too? And for you, it's obviously trying to get them to talk to your sales team.
Yeah.
No, that's super smart, Mark, and I love the way you summarize that up to this is about the who, the what, the why, because as marketers, it's really easy to start looking at data as just a list and not remember what this is really is an expression of interest from a set of individuals and their people with their own needs. And that's why I love this use case, because I would totally have responded to that level of personalization. And you only get that with a really thoughtful strategy, as you both articulated.
Yeah, and it's actually I think we answered the question that someone has about like what did you drive them to on the website? Did you drive them to a particular spot? It was just you knew these accounts were showing high intent, and you wanted to try to engage with them on the website, right, Jessica?
Yeah, we didn't put any like spend behind this to try and like target these accounts with like digital ads. We kind of just took a hunch, like if they're comparing us to competitors, then they're probably going to check out our website at some point. So we didn't do anything extra. We just assumed based on the data that they were going to come to our site, and we were right in that hypothesis.
Well, and what's super important about that is every marketer right now in this environment is being asked to do more with less. And this isn't a question of so many marketing ideas start with, it would be great if we bought this new tool or platform. But here you said, I have these 2 tools, I have TrustRadius, I have Drift. Is there a way to create value with some smart work, but not necessarily incremental spend? And that's one of the things that I think is most compelling about it is in a time when every marketer is trying to get, more out of less budget, this is a really clear example of doing so. One of the important things about data that I've been thinking of late is the fact that it's not all created equal. There's, obviously many players in the intent market. Some of them are very much top of funnel signals, broad interest in topics, and some of them are very much conveying complex signals. We're seeing exactly what people are doing and what they might be interested in. So the two axes on which I think about it are, is it top or bottom of funnel? Is it broad interest in a topic or specific interest in a product? And then is it a simple signal, simply a count of page views, or some level of complexity and richness? I'm seeing what behaviors people are engaging in. Are they running comparisons? Are they, taking specific action? So that's, for what it's worth, if you're evaluating your current intent data that you have on hand, that is a way to think about the different types of it, because in my mind, it's not a question of one provider, only one provider. It's a question of, you probably want a balanced diet of intent data to an extent. And with that, I want to cut to the next poll, because I'm super curious to know what intent providers people have today.
I think what was most valuable for us with the true intent data is really just to see which accounts were comparing Optimizely to competitors. Like I said, that's gold to us, and it allows us as marketers to get really granular with our messaging and get specific with how we are different and better with these competitors.
That's a great point, and that again goes to Mark's, the right message to the right person, because you know what they're thinking about, and that's a piece of that sort of granularity or detail in the data.
It also just makes the buying experience more enjoyable for the buyers.
Right.
All righty. Poll results in. This is super interesting. Relatively good spread, everybody represented. Good to know that we have some people that have and are using TrustRadius data, and I'm hoping that this webinar gives them, ideas on more ways to use it. So curious to know, Jessica, you've obviously, I love that you said that you have a test and learn approach to everything. That has to be pretty much in the DNA of Optimizely, I would think. So knowing that you do test, learn, and advance, what's next from your perspective?
Yeah, the playbook that I created with the TrustRadius data was really the start of our drift revolution. This year, we've created so many different playbooks, and I'm really excited for this next phase of this TrustRadius bot, which is going to be competitor focused. We're going to use that true intent data to tailor bot messaging based on which competitors' accounts are searching. And we're going to be using our own product, drinking our own champagne, and using Optimizely to A/B test competitive messages inside Drift to see what is resonating with our audience.
Love that. So literally we talked about combining TrustRadius and Drift, but you're going, okay, the trio of TrustRadius, Drift, and Optimizely, there is a lot you can do because it is a highly, highly qualified audience for you. So this is going to be real interested in knowing what comes out of the next set of tests. And tell us a little more about, you've obviously done some thinking, and you probably both have some insight on this. You've done some thinking about what messages, convert and how you establish that. So Jessica, do you want to walk us through that? How are you looking at that?
Yeah, I just want to do a quick plug. If you're interested, if you're an Optimizely customer and you're a Drift customer and you want to A/B test your messages, it's really, really simple to use Optimizely to set up an A/B test in Drift. There's an excellent blog post on our website by our program manager that has like step-by-step details of how to set that up. I'm really excited to start doing that for some of these competitive bots. I think what I have learned with Drift is really making the experience as personal as you can, based on what page they're on, what content they've engaged with, even just like changing the greeting if you know it's a returning visitor to say, hey, welcome back. Like that really makes a big difference for engagement.
Interesting.
Yeah. I couldn't agree more. Sometimes we say, hey, thanks for coming over from Google, because they clicked on a Google ad or a Facebook ad, right? And you welcome them back and you add that context. And it's a it's really important to think through and test, to your point, Jessica, the first question. And we call it like the first way you're going to engage someone. So how do you ask them a question and acknowledge something at the same time? If you can do that within 1 or 2 sentences within the conversational experience that you put on that page, using the other context that you talked about, Jessica, which could be anything from the intent data to the channel they came from, to the page they're on, to who they are, obviously, which gets into the intent data, then you're going to have a much higher chance of having a higher engagement rate and ultimately achieving the goal you have with that conversational chatbot, either getting someone to book a meeting, getting someone to live chat with that visitor, or just guiding that visitor to some type of piece of content, demo video, etc. So what I kind of just described there is like the engage, which I'll talk about, I think, on the next slide, Russ, is like the engage, understand, recommend framework we have. How do you engage? How do you understand the buyer? How do you help them understand a little bit more? And how do you recommend the best possible thing for them? And again, Jessica, going back to your example with that campaign you did, that all of that engagement, that understanding and recommendation happened really quickly because you knew that they were looking at competitors. You knew they were at the more of the decision stage of the buying journey.
Yep, exactly. And I think it just like echoes really the importance of like testing different things. Like in our drift program, we learned that asking for email early in the conversation, we actually got great engagement. Like I thought that, oh, we should ask a couple qualifying questions first, and I was happy to be wrong and to just test something else. I think something else that has really, really worked with our drift strategy is having a strong partnership with our SDR team. We have actually a working group, our Tiger team, with a couple of volunteer SDRs who have helped so much with the messaging and the strategy behind drift, because they talk to prospects all the time and they know what is going to resonate with certain prospects based on their experience, which is something like, as a marketer, I'm not on the front lines on the phone, so that type of data is really important. And they're just amazing partners, and it's great to have those advocates of drift in your SDR org.
Such an important point, Jessica. I mean, I like to think of it as marketing starts the conversation, right, and speeds up the conversion, right, and then sales now, or the SDR team, has to have the conversation.
Yeah, and it's all about a partnership. Everyone has to be on the same page, and we're all working towards the same goals.
Well, and as a marketer, you can learn a lot from the messaging of SDRs. It's really easy to sort of get a little wrapped around the axle in terms of talking about your own product, your own solution. And there's a great line that I use all the time that came from one of our SDRs. She made the statement in an email, people read reviews because they're planning to buy something. And that is so simple. It's so simple that as a marketer, I probably would not say it. And yet when I heard it, I'm like, okay, that's completely true. So I listen to them a lot, and they are arguably better copywriters than most marketers because they have to be.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, Jessica, I'm curious. Like, one thing we do at Drift, we call it, Kate Adams, who runs our demand gen and sales development teams, calls it surprise and delight. So like, you know, how do you surprise the prospect, the buyer, with something of interest or uniqueness, because you know something about them based off of the data you have either on the intent side or the behavior side from like the website behaviors they exhibited or exhibiting now, and then you're delighting them with some type of like really quick, useful insight.
Yeah, we're trying to work that more into our drift strategy, is having these little bites of information that's a hook for people to say, oh, I didn't know that, or that's interesting to me, and then trying to bring them further down the funnel by either talking to SDRs or offering up some lower funnel piece of content.
Like that.
I like that because it's really a thought about, you're trying to get them to move down a journey, but you can't force them. You entice them that with that data, that value, something they didn't know. And just like you would in a conversation, right? People want to learn stuff and advance the conversation. Mark, are there other sort of best practices that we should talk about? Because I could, scoot on to the next slide, but are there other things we should think about in terms of what you'd recommend somebody do using Drift?
I mean, I think it's just actually recommendations for a good sales experience. So the give get. And it sounds like, Jessica, you're trying to work on
Mhm.
making the give get a lot better too. And you want to, the way we designed this framework that Jessica uses really well, this engage, understand framework, we call it just the conversational framework, is the same way you as a human would have a conversation with another person, like a person-to-person conversation, right? There's engagement that happens, there's some type of shared understanding that has to happen, and then there's recommendations that happen as well. And that can be very fluid, right? Like there could be obviously this initial engagement, the engagement continues because you're getting to know each other better, the questions are getting answered, and you're going deeper, you're sharing recommendations throughout the conversation. So when you think about like your conversational experience with one of your campaigns, as an example, which I think is actually on the next slides, we are trying to help a business get to know the buyer a bit better. So when you set up your drift, playbooks, for example, which is what it's called in the product, you're trying to ask questions while also giving pieces of advice or recommendations. So like, for example, you don't want to just ask a question, they give you their answer by selecting one of the button responses and then ask another question. You want to ask a question, say, oh, that's great, did you know? Da, 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 da. You could add even customer proof or a customer quote there, or some type of social proof. You could add in some type of educational nugget of information, and then you go ask the next question. So you're trying to make it really conversational.
So value at each step, which is just, as you say, like a conversation. A conversation is you're exchanging nuggets of value. And you mentioned the, sort of the benchmarks, the case study. I'd love to hear a little more about this in terms of, because this to me was a fascinating case study when you ran it by me.
Yeah, this is interesting, and it sounds like, Jessica, I'd love to learn more again of what you're going to be doing. It sounds like you're going to be putting dollars behind a lot of these things now with intent data and drift. WebPT used drift to triple, which is crazy, the number of leads they're getting each month, and really like so that's interesting. So that they're getting 3x more leads, but what they really did, and I'll kind of walk you through how they did it, was they improved like the user experience, the buying experience on most of their landing pages. They improved the quality of that experience by guiding people to the right thing, depending on if they were a customer, a buyer that was more at the beginning of the buying journey versus the bottom of the buying journey. And they were able to customize those conversations and messaging using A/B testing and using signals and intent data from like the paid side of things. So this is where like you can use these kind of three things together: your channel, the data you have, and then like a conversational experience to really increase your conversion rate by making it more personal, related to exactly what that buyer is thinking at that moment. And make it very connected to how they got to your website and getting them to their outcome as fast as possible. So they're connecting those things again together. I go back to the who, like who's clicking on this ad, who's coming to the website, where did they come from? In this case, it was paid. What page did they land on? They had a plethora of landing pages, so they would change the conversational experience based off of the landing page, the offer, and the ad. And then it's like, why are they on that landing page? Why are they trying to learn more about that solution or your product or whatever the message, the CTA that got them to click to go to the website made them do that. So you're connecting again the who, the where, the what, and the why in this nice chain. And I mean, Jessica, this is what it sounds like you're starting to do a lot more of too with Drift, as you think about aligning it to campaigns and getting more ROI from the campaigns.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And I think like the point you brought up with spend is super important, because you're spending money to get eyes on your content, to get more people on your website. And Drift can really help you take it a step further, like get the most bang for your buck for your ad spend, and really help like make your content work for you. Something that we're exploring is like the landing page bots. Like if someone is viewing a video or a content, like how can we offer up additional content or value, or get the people who are interested in taking a meeting directly directly to our sales team. So I think it's really all about having the right data really makes all these tools work together, and you can create amazing, very tailored experiences when you have all these data points in one buyer's journey.
Well, and we are back to Disney because once again, it's the experience, right? And that's the way that you both are thinking of this. And
Exactly.
and one of the big impacts from that is, you mentioned the fastest deal cycle in history, right? And so I'm just interested in both your thoughts on that in terms of, it sounds like you think this not only drives additional engagement, but it should move things along a lot faster, which, time is at a premium. And I loved your statement at the start, Jessica, that we did this in part because we needed leads now. We couldn't afford to wait for people to fill out a form.
That's right. And our drift strategy so far really has been all about fast tracking qualified prospects and accounts to our SDR team. So we've really built out bots on our high intent pages. And that's a recommendation I have too. If you're unsure where to start with drift, look at the pages that are getting the most traffic or have the highest intent, like a pricing page, and think of how you can use drift to really make those like pipeline machines, monetize those pages. So that's really been our strategy so far, is just making sure that we're always giving our top accounts a way to contact our SDRs if they're showing intent. I'm really excited with the progress that we've made with Drift so far. We've booked almost 200 meetings this year using Drift globally, which is fantastic. And our rate of conversation is up by 21% compared to last year. So we're really trying to have, I would love like a Drift bot almost on like every page of the website. I think especially now with everyone working from home, like we really need to treat users on our site like gold. Like if they're coming to our site, we want them to take action, and we're going to help guide that journey for those really qualified accounts.
Which is super smart, because you can know via true intent which are the really qualified accounts. And then you're right, they're like gold, because if you don't take advantage of the opportunity when they're on your site, you find yourself needing to do ad spend to reach them in other places. And that can be profitable, but let's make the most of what we have as well, which I think is a phenomenally good insight.
Yeah, I just say the one that we didn't talk about specifically yet, but we should, TrustRadius has this great intent data set, but like if you go to the actual website, the reviews in TrustRadius, and you use the content from what your customers are saying about your solution and product, and then you use that in your website copy, and you use that in these chatbots and as the follow-up emails, or in the follow-up emails, and you really make sure you're leveraging the customer proof in smart ways, which again, I think marketers could do a better job of as well. You're going to actually probably increase your conversion rates, and you can do this just through what Jessica is saying, like use Optimizely to test it. And you're also then going to probably come up with some like maybe new ways to position from like a product marketing standpoint your product and offering, and really fine tune how people are talking about it and how it's helping them.
That's an absolutely great point, and that sort of leads into the next thing, which is this use case that we've talked about today is a super powerful use case of bringing Optimizely, Drift, and TrustRadius True Intent data together. The voice of the customer, I wouldn't be in the role I was in if I didn't believe that it really, really mattered. And everything from above the funnel, before people ever hit your website, to as they start reading reviews and visiting your site, that content is super powerful, whether you're injecting it into landing pages as 8x8 did to increase their conversion 150% on some target landing pages, or whether it is using it in sales cycles. The voice of the customer matters, and it lets you target people with the right message, and you don't have to guess at the right message because it's in the words of the customer. It's what they're saying, it's what they believe, and a customer has far more credibility than a marketer. And I hate to say that, but I think that's kind of true, is at this point people want to know what other customers have to say. So I'd like to, at this point, this has been a fascinating conversation. I'm super curious, Adele, are there any interesting questions? Because we'd love to answer any questions we can.
Hi, yes, thank you guys so much for all of this amazing information. Even I, who've been putting together the webinar, listening to you guys actually talk about it live, I'm like, oh man, these are some great ideas. So I really appreciate y'all. We had a couple of questions come through. One that I thought was, particularly interesting was, Jessica, with the test that you ran, are there specific pages that you saw convert better than others while running this drift test? I don't know if they saw, where that was happening, but there's some insights on that would be interesting.
Yeah, there wasn't any specific page that we were seeing higher conversions on. I will say that looking at our drift strategy as a whole, we really do see higher conversions with people that are coming to like our plans page and checking out our different product offerings, which to me makes sense because if they're visiting the plans page, they're probably ready to take a conversation and learn more about Optimizely, which goes back to if you have those high traffic, high intent pages, what can you do to really monetize those and make sure you're reaching the right accounts with the right message. So we've had a lot of success with our plans page, and looking to what's next, we're going to be working on what's going to be on our homepage, like what's the strategy for unnamed accounts, new visitors, or customers on our homepage. What does that look like?
Awesome, very cool. We had another question come through that says, if I don't have an ABM program yet, can I still use True Intent, and how would that work? Question mark.
It's a great question. From my perspective, an ABM program often starts with a little bit of guessing. You look at the market and go, who do I wish was interested in my product? And that's how you start, right? You build out your list of accounts, your target list of accounts. The beautiful thing about starting with true intent data is you don't have to guess. You can pull that data down and understand who's looking at you now. So rather than doing the guesswork of targeting accounts that might or might not care, you can actually start with a short list of accounts that you know have some level of interest. So going back to right message, right audience, right time, it takes the guesswork out of the audience piece of it, and you know you're going out after a receptive audience. So it may actually, rather than saying, I need an ABM program before I can start using true intent, you could think about reversing that and saying, I have true intent data, so let's use that to, with very low effort, let's create an ABM program built around that.
Very cool. And then as the marketer, I will plug that we'll be sending out a link where you can get a free trial of some true intent data. So you can check it out for yourself. All right, we've got one other question that came through, and this will be for Drift. It's, Jessica's story was super interesting and a creative way to use the Drift chatbot. What are some other interesting ways that you've seen clients get creative?
Yeah, it's a good question. So we have this this model that can help, I think, people understand how to increase their sophistication with Drift and how it connects into their marketing and sales efforts. So I'll briefly explain it. It starts with like just engaging your website visitors. So that's what we talked a lot about today. What are your high intent pages, to Jessica's point? We actually do recommend you create this engage all. It's called the engage all play, and you put that chatbot on all of your pages, and it's actually a learning machine. So like if you put that chatbot on all of your pages, and we would help you set this up. We have resources to help you set it up. You will quickly learn a lot about the visitors coming to your website. Again, going back to the who, and then over the next couple weeks, you'll refine the pricing page playbook. You would refine your product and solution pages. We actually see a lot of customers have success with resource centers and blogs because you're guiding people to the thing, and you're also, a lot of the times people come to those pages and they actually do have pretty high intent, but you just don't give them an easy way to engage and talk to your sales team. So using them on those pages can be very advantageous. But once you engage with people, it's then about targeting. And that's what this whole broadcast was today. How do you target people using that framework I was explaining before, the who, where, what, why, through the channels you're using and the offers you're using. So we use an integrated campaigns program structure at Drift. So you have like the campaign you're running for the year, the programs within that campaign, the offers that are part of those programs, and the channels. You can use conversational marketing, Drift, across all those things. And you can use Optimizely to test all those things. And you could use intent data across all those things. So that's kind of like the second like stage. And then the third stage is really around like accelerating your deal cycle. And that's where, like, you know, I'm not going to talk a lot about it, but we have you know, AI enabled products, you know, products that have a true AI engines, artificial intelligence engines. And that experience is going to take all the guesswork from you. You don't actually create the chatbots or worry about what to say. Like, the AI is going to do all that for you. That we could do a whole nother webinar on that with these two folks. But that's how you really accelerate your deals, by being completely 100% present across your website 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And no matter who engages with that conversational experience, you're giving them the best possible experience for whatever they're looking to do.
I love that, because what you're really doing is scaling up the size of the training data by getting data from every page interaction so you can learn really quickly. And I think that's super smart.
All righty, well, that was all of our questions. And I do want to add, as someone who started their career in marketing, in software, and I had to be the person on the chat, I was the physical human behind the chat. I really love that there's now an automated way to do that. All righty. Thank you all so much, Russ, Jessica, and Mark, for your awesome insights. I mean, I myself have learned a ton. For everyone who's on the call, we will be sending out all of the resources that we talked about in this event, but then also the slides as well as the recording this afternoon. And thank you all so much. Y'all have a great day.
Thank you all. Mark, Jessica, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.